this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Sunday morning chat today, as often, about nothing in particular. I've got my eye, you'll have to excuse me, I'm hacking into Microsoft Office on the Society laptop over there. I'm just keeping my eye on its progress over there. I may have to intervene. But yesterday's meeting was quite fun actually. Started with the committee meeting, yawn. Well, actually it started earlier than that because some idiot got there ridiculously early. Normally there's some other people use the same hall as we use and they're there quite a bit before us, so the building's normally open. But I got there was only one other person who got there silly early, who was sat reading something in his car. And after the journey preceded by quite a few coffees, there was a visit I needed to do, so I hurried round to the door and it was locked. I thought, I can't get in. So anyway, we had to drag the caretaker out of his little house, and you're not supposed to be in there till 12 o'clock. So I explained the situation and he said, okay, I'll come and unlock. So we got the emergency dealt with and then waited for others to turn up, as they do. And we got in there and did tables and all that sort of stuff and got the meeting going. And I'd put down an item of any other business to show the committee members the new laptop that I'd bought for them to replace the US one that they had before. So yeah, we did all that, and then the meeting finished quite early, and Chairman Lynn, who you know, was getting a bit worried because there was nobody there. And then we looked at the clock and thought, yeah, that's because we finished early for a change. So it does go on a bit sometimes. Anyway, the speakers were two members, both of which are on the committee. So they started setting up the projector and all stuff like that, and they've got their own laptop. And then there was a sort of face that turned a bit white, because the lead they used to connect their laptop to the projector wasn't in the bag and they didn't really know where it was. So I was asked, could we use the Society's laptop? That's what it's for, those sort of things. So I said, yeah, I'll get it fired up, got it plugged in and everything like that. And the guy had a memory stick with his presentation on. We stuck that in, and of course the first problem was there was no software to run it. Because he uses Microsoft Office, which is, so it's a PowerPoint presentation, that's the standard software everybody uses, but I don't. I use the Apache OpenOffice version, which is free, and it's like a downsized version. It's got virtually everything you'd need without the clutter that you get in the Microsoft products, or what I call clutter anyway. You know, 9/10 of it has stuff that you're just never going to use. So anyway, I said, well, I haven't actually loaded OpenOffice on here yet. It's on my list of things to do. What am I going to do then? I'll have to go home and get the lead. And I said, well, as far as I know, there's a Wi-Fi hub out in the hallway. Yes. I said, well, if I can connect to the internet, I'll download it now, and then we've got the software to run it. Fingers crossed. So pretty clever bit of thinking. He went out and used his phone to take a photo of the password to bring in so that I could type it in on the laptop. If you've ever seen Wi-Fi passwords, they're big letters, little letters, an odd number thrown in, and they're about that long. You can't just memorize it. So anyway, we got the password in, I got into the internet and started to download, and he said, I think I'm going to go home and get the lead anyway as a fail-safe, because if this doesn't work, by the time we find out it's not going to work, it'll be too late to go home and get the lead. So he rushed off to go and get the lead. And I carried on setting up. And we eventually used, we just set it all up using the leads we already had, basically. So I got it all working, and his presentation was loaded up on the screen, everything sort of ready. So the presentation went ahead. And it was good because this husband and wife, and they set up a terrarium, giant beastie of a thing, sort of well over 1 metre tall, and something similar wide on a stand and everything. And they just showed pictures and talked about the process they went through from start to finish, from getting the thing to working out roughly what they wanted to do with it, and then getting the extras like the lights and a mister and all that sort of stuff. It was really interesting how it progressed, and then trying out plants. And they tried covering the bottom with some moss, and that promptly died, so that didn't work, so they had to think again. And it's just the process of what was basically trial and error to find out which plants would grow. And the really interesting thing for me was, the first thing you think of is, you know, this is going to be in a house, so it's going to have basic similar temperatures to a home, which is a little bit warm for some of the cooler growers perhaps, but with that level of humidity in an enclosed space, they should grow fine. And he couldn't get Masdevallias to grow. Many other things, including some unexpected things, grew fine, but the Masdevallias just wouldn't get a hold. And there were several gaps in places where they had been and ceased to be. Difficult to work out quite why, but several other people said that's the one type of orchid they've really had trouble getting to grow at all in any form of home environment. So anyway, so we got the laptop working, but what happened was the presentation had some bits that didn't format correctly when projected up. So obviously a PowerPoint presentation that's done in Microsoft Office PowerPoint using some of their facilities doesn't directly translate into the OpenOffice version, which is why I'm getting the proper version now, because most of the people that come with presentations on a little memory stick or something or other expect it to run under Microsoft Office PowerPoint. So I'm getting it loaded now. In fact, it looks like it's just finished. I'll try it out in a minute. But yeah, quite honestly, if you're brave enough, there's virtually no software that you're supposed to pay for that you can't get for free. There are ways. Some are a little naughty, although this one is, the software is legitimate, the activation is not. But it's been done. Let's put it that way. It's a very easy thing to do if you've got the inkling. When you run anything on a computer, the code that it's using is actually accessible if you know what you're doing, and then you can look at the code and take out the bits that you need and replace them with some other bits and run that instead. It's not that difficult, despite Microsoft doing their best to stop you, and others, you know. Probably shouldn't have said all that really, but especially as I know there's some Wessex people watching. Anyway, I took along quite a lot of my plants to sell, and of course I didn't think of the protocol. When you go to sell at the Orchid Societies, they're supposed to take a percentage, so you're supposed to have a list of your plants with the prices on, so that when you've worked out what you've actually sold, you can give the treasurer a total and hand over your contribution to the society, which I hadn't done. All I said was, just make me an offer. No reasonable offer refused. I'd not taken them home. One I gave away to the actual people who did the presentation for their terrarium, which was the Restrepia gutulata. Actually had a bloom on it as well, so they could see what they were getting. So they were pleased with that. The two things that didn't sell, and I found out why. The species Bulbophyllum sycamense took off at a very good price. I mean, that was quite a large plant actually. This little Bulbophyllum species, I don't know what it's called, so I couldn't shift it. Nobody would take it without knowing what it was, if you see what I mean. Nobody could also be bothered to take it cheap and look it up on the flipping internet. But anyway, this is a good little plant. This has, many of the leads are now producing 2 new growths. So like this lead here has got a new growth each side. This lead's got a new growth. This one's got a new growth. And there's also a new growth started on a back bulb. It has bloomed. The problem is, I don't know what it's called because it was mislabeled at the nursery. So we are still trying to find out what it is. I might end up keeping it. It's not exactly a big plant, is it? And it does have very pretty but tiny little blooms. And you know what I'm like with the little blooms saga. And the other one that I couldn't shift was the Bulbophyllum Wilbur Chang. Nobody wanted that thing. It is rather large though. So I've got a bottom line. I will try again at the Bournemouth Orchid Society in a couple of weeks' time. The Medio Calcar with the little blooms, little orange and yellow blooms, that went quickly. Somebody had that straight away at a good price as well. So, but there were 3 or 4 other people trying to sell plants as well, which I wasn't expecting, I must admit. So, and an awful lot of them went home with those people. I mean, my friend had a basket about that big with a Coelogeny cristata in it, with spikes coming. You just couldn't shift it, you know. So some things just don't sell, and others just fly away. But there's an awful lot of the society growers have moved right over to cool. So you know, they're mainly sort of into the Masdevallias, pleurothalids in general, but the cooler growers, because it saves so much on heating in the UK because of our cooler winters. But then you still got to keep them cool in the summer, you know. Unless you're going to stand out there and blow on them, then you're going to need fans and sort of stuff like that. So swings and roundabouts. So we got rid of some plants, and I took great delight when I got home of loading up my notes and deleting the lines where they were. And that spreadsheet's getting smaller all the time with the load that I dumped, and there's still some on the list that are borderline getting thrown away. I'm just giving them a little last chance, I suppose, because they're a little bit more important to me. So we'll see how we go with the downsizing, but it's coming on. The Brassivola Little Stars that went quite quickly as well, again with spikes and a proper name, so that went off. I had a good price for that as well. And that leaves me some space in an area where I could do with a bit of space. So yeah. And what I am looking forward to doing is, once I've shifted another lot of plants, we're heading towards the time when the day lengths get back to normal. I know it seems a while off, but it's going to come round. At which point the lights come out, at which point I can get my hanging racks back up where they should be, and things that are a bit squashed up at the moment can spread out. And by then quite a few more pots will have gone, and I can get stuff that the books say need quite heavy shade up onto higher shelves because they don't. You know, this is the UK. Even our bright light isn't that bright. So the experiment with the Masdevallia ignea will be the test, quite honestly. But then I've also got to consider that last year, having only put 1 layer of shade netting on for part of a season, a lot of my Oncidium types didn't like it. So there's a limitation. But I can get round that by having 2 layers of shade in places and not in others. So I can get some stronger light in parts of the grow room and some more suitable light for others in other parts of the grow room, instead of just generalising. So that's the plan down the line. The Dinema polybulbon now officially has an owner. I've just got to get it to them. And they live on literally on my path to pick my daughter up. You know, it's like about a 2-minute detour off the main road. So I've said I'll drop it off. And if they want any other plants, once I get the list done, they can have those dropped off as well. Saves wrapping up and posting. I'm all for that. I'm not travelling thousands of miles to deliver plants, but if it's on my way, I'm happy with that. So that's about where we are now. I've got no new blooms to show. There's nothing opened that hasn't been shown before, but obviously we're very close to the everything in bloom. So, you know, that is in bloom is in bloom, and I haven't got a huge amount in bud. So I think we'd better start getting some ideas from you good people as to what sort of videos you'd like to see. I've had several people have requested the spotlight type video where you pick a plant and do a brain dump, everything you know about the plant, where it comes from, habitat, all that sort of stuff, and how I look after it, because that might not be the same as how others look after it. We've got all these different climates all around the world, you know, and what's good for one might be a death knell for somebody else, you know. Oh, I keep mine outside all year round. Yeah, well, I wouldn't do that in the north of England, you know, or even in the south, come to think of it. So, and you'll be pleased to hear my A good friend who lost his wife on Christmas Eve was actually at the meeting, and really pleased to see him getting about, because that's sometimes the most difficult thing, is to go and face people, because you know what they're going to come up and say. You've got to be able to deal with it, you know, emotionally. So it was good to see him out and about. Good stuff. I haven't heard an update on our chairman from the Bournemouth Orchid Society yet, but he doesn't sound in a good way at the moment. So I highly doubt he will be at the next meeting in whatever it is, a couple of weeks' time. So, and the other bit of news, it only really affects people in the UK or people who run nurseries in the EU. But now that Brexit is confirmed and it is going to take place, there is a subtle difference in what some people wanted and what they actually got. Yes, we're leaving the EU at the end of January, but we're leaving with a deal. Now this is important. Our show manager from Bournemouth Orchid Society has been in direct contact with the show manager at Malvern, which is the big international show in this country. I don't think there is anything even close to that one. It's huge, as orchid shows go in the UK. And that show manager has been in direct contact with DEFRA, which is the body that enforce CITES. They are the legislative body that deal with that. And they have officially declared that because we're leaving with a deal, while we're in the transition period, which hopefully is to the end of this year, everything stays the same. So orchids between the EU and the UK just carry on as though nothing's happened until the end of that transition period. That means the international show at Malvern is full steam ahead. It's a go. The international and the EU sellers are all booking up to come across because they know they're now okay. It may still be the last one ever on that scale, but it's on for this year. So I'm going to go ahead and book up for my daughter Hannah's going to come this year, but we're only going for, we're hoping to go up on the Saturday, take part in the Saturday night festivities, which were a bit of fun last year to say the least, and then stop the night in the hotel, have a decent breakfast, go to the show on the Sunday, and then head off home. So, you know, like a very short weekend break. But Hannah's quite keen to come on that, so I need to get that booked up. That's ages away, that's in June. But that bit of news about DEFRA not kicking in for a while, I mean, you know my views on CITES. It was set up with the best of intentions. Loads of people signed up to it, and some of them signed up to it and have done absolutely nothing about it. I could guarantee if I went on eBay now, I would be able to find lots of our native orchids and orchids that are incredibly rare in the UK but more common in the EU for sale on eBay in, I could mention but I won't because it's rude, 3 specific countries that are selling them on eBay. And that's because there is no enforcement in those countries. They do nothing about CITES. Those have been dug up from the wild, I know they have. So I don't buy them, but I do my bit, but I don't want those type of orchids anyway. But as I said, you know, it's all very well signing up to it, but if you then don't enforce it, it doesn't achieve anything. So be it. And I'm going to leave it at that because I've got stuff going on in there I need to deal with, and I need to water out here because I should have done it yesterday and I was out all day. So I'm late on the mounts, which is the one thing that can't go too long overdue without having detrimental effects, shall we say. Nothing else much needs doing out here. If I get the mounts done, if I'm feeling in the mood, the holy clay pots will get done, but they can wait till tomorrow. They're not desperate. But I really need to do the mounts. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. And any ideas for videos, please stick them in the comments. I'm open to suggestions. Because this time of year there isn't a lot going on. I mean, I did a mount. That was more of an emergency mount than routine, if you know what I mean. There are some mounts that might get their moss changed down the line, which means I need to get some more moss, come to think of it. And I need to go and get some live moss as well to bump that up, because the stocks are getting low. They wouldn't have got so low if I hadn't left it outside and let the birds steal it to make their nests with. So, plus there's a couple of the larger birds that just come in there and throw it all out, seeing if they can find anything to eat in the bottom of the tray. Cheeky monkeys. So yes, we'll leave it at that. The one thing I will get down, because I haven't looked at it for a while, because it missed out, although it's not a true rester, it is semi-resting, simply because the temperatures are low. Mr. Hairy gets looked at about every third watering. And I just wanted to see what progress we've got on buds. These are not going to be easy to see, but I'll do what I can by using fingers. Right, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 spikes on that cane, and 1, 2 on that cane. I can see, turning it round, see if there's any more. Oh no, there's a third one lower down. So that's 7. So at the moment I can see 7 spikes. That may be all there's going to be, but bearing in mind I think we only had 1 last year, 7's pretty good going. And there's a lot of the growths that are still actively growing at the moment, which is not why I'm not resting it, that are not large enough yet. Now I'm hoping they can keep growing just long enough to get into the better weather, at which point they will carry on. Otherwise they're going to stall as quite small growths, which will limit their ability to bloom. But then we're going to come into the growing season anyway, and you know, additional new growths will start. But as I said, at the moment I can see 4 spikes on that cane and 3 on that cane. I was hoping this one would try and spike, but it did bloom. That's the one that bloomed last year. Now it's quite a large cane, but it only had 1 spike on it, which then grew a root, which is odd. But some dendrobiums do that. Yeah, so we will get blooms on that, and the buds are now, you can see them clearly now, whereas before they were a speck of green, but they are starting to push away from the canes now. That's going to look nice when it comes into bloom. Spikes are all quite close together in one part of the plant. Get that dead leaf off, that'll make it look prettier. So, coming on, pleased with that. They're not that easy to grow, those things. Well, they always seem easy to grow for a while, and then for some reason they just seem to keel over. And then they're not very easy at that point. I had 3 quite large mounted orchids that went to a friend. Those were pre-arranged. And one of the Coelogene Morianas, again, went to a friend. So that's, you know, 3 quite large mounts and a large pot, as well as the others that went. So this space is gradually coming round. And I think the next time, if I try the Bournemouth Orchid Society, and it doesn't work very well, because they're even tighter with their money than the Wessex lot. The Wessex aren't so bad, but Bournemouth lot, you know, they'll get a blinking specimen-sized Cattleya with like 10 bulbs on, a named, you know, variety or even a species, and they don't want to pay any more than a £5 for it. They are so tight. Plus there is at the Bournemouth Orchid Society, there's some very heavy on the unusual type orchid type people, you know. You know, they wouldn't be interested in anything store-bought. A lot of them aren't interested in anything large. It has to be small, magnifying glass for the blooms. They're after the unusual. And a lot of that type of mentality happens after many, many, many years of growing orchids. And perhaps a general tiredness sets in of what you've got. And so the only way forward is to go for the unusual. But they don't do, well, a lot of them don't do much for me, I must admit. So, right. Yeah, there may be some other things. Somebody was selling quite a nice Bulbophyllum Elizabeth Ann Buckleberry, and that is a very popular orchid. I think they did actually manage to sell it. I don't know what they got for it. There was a couple of Sarcochilis for sale, and I think at Wessex there's going to be quite a few of them, because quite a few clubbed together to get flasks from one of the EU sellers. So obviously when you deflask you end up with 20 odd blinking plants. You don't want them all, because they're all the same in the flask, obviously. Yeah, so there'll be some more of those around. And while we're on that subject, Lynn showed a couple of her Sarcochilis with spikes starting, so I thought I'll have a quick look at mine. And my two hybrids, which are good plants, with, if I get one out, I'm not going to get them all out. This is one of the hybrids I got last year, and it's growing really well and has produced some young growths, several, like this one, and then this one round here with the two main growths up the top, which are producing new growths. It's growing well. I think it's done a decent root system as well. Yeah, we've got some nice healthy roots running around the bottom of the pot. So it's growing well, but there's no sign of any spikes on it yet. But it was in bloom when it was given to me, so there's no reason why it shouldn't bloom again at the appropriate time. But only having had them for a very short time, I'm not quite sure when that is. But I do have one that I've had a few years, which is a species, Hartmannii, which is this one. Look! Oh, sorry, it's only a drip tray. And this one just refuses to grow from the base. So it's still only got the single growth it's ever had, but it does have a spike. So we do have a spike starting on that one. That's a species. And quite honestly, I think that might do a bit better if it went a bit deeper in the pot. It does look a bit sticky outy, doesn't it, from the media? I think that it either needs, I can't raise the media up anymore because it's right at the top of the, what you're looking at is the black pot that's enclosing the pot it's potted in. Yeah, and that pot is already full. So I don't know whether I can get it out. It might pull out without coming out of the pot. Yeah. Ah, this one's in a net basket. It just shows how often I take it out. And that's grown an awful lot of roots at the bottom of that little basket, some of which have come out and gone round. Those would have died back if they hadn't been enclosed, I suspect. So that wouldn't be very easy to get out of that basket and without losing those roots that have come through, which are good roots. But what I could do is cut the basket off and sacrifice it. That's got a good root system on it, but there's not a lot of room to top it up, and I can't lower it. So we might have to have a play with that, I think. I think we might have to take it out of its pot that it's in now and put it in something perhaps a little deeper so that these external roots, now although these look as though they're aerial roots, they're not really, because they're enclosed inside this pot, which is a tight fit. They're in a very, very dark, moist atmosphere, because obviously the humidity from that basket when it's been watered is completely contained in there because the pot's a tight fit. So those roots are actually damp, yeah, and in the dark. So they will transition into a normal pot quite easily. So we might have a play with that one, I think, and get it in a sort of deeper pot. It certainly doesn't need to be any wider, not yet. But if it went down a little closer to the base, it might encourage some new growths from the base, which is how they grow, or how they normally grow, not how this one grows. So we might have to do a bit of work on that one, I think, because I like these. Don't plan on getting thousands of them, but they don't take up space. That's what I like about them. So that's good stuff. And I'm just having a quick look at, there's one particular plant that I've just got a feeling is going to start pushing its buds soon. Nah, not yet, not yet. Plus I've got some nobelies that are still not showing nubbins. They should be, really. They should be starting soon, if not. Can I get at one? Just about. And now that a couple of the other mounts have gone walkies, things are a little bit more spacious. Now this is a nobly type that's, aha, yeah, they weren't there last time. I can count 2. 2 is more than none, which were there last time. I know it's going to bloom, it's just a matter of when and what it's going to look like. Again, this was a gift, and this really is going to be probably very difficult to see, but on this cane here, There's a nub in there and another one the other side there. So it's just starting to bud. That's the only two I can see. Oh no, three. All on the same cane though. There's another one. There's one here, and another little one up there. So buds are just starting, which is good stuff. And there's a couple of rescuing type noblies that if they start doing that, as soon as they extend away from the cane, they'll get cut off because I'm rescuing them. I don't want to stress them out by letting them bloom. Oh, so that's that one. Yeah, I think that's about it. The Cattleya, orange Cattleya up there is starting to open quite a few buds, but if I don't water those today, which I probably won't, quite honestly, I've got stuff to do. So if I do the holy clay pots tomorrow, we'll have a closer look at those and see if there's any buds or anything lurking. The one I'm really keen on looking at is the purpurata. Laelia purpurata has produced 2 new growths every year since I had it. When I got it at Malvern, which would have been June a few years ago, it had signs of 2 new growths, so 2 leads, which is why I got it. And those grew on and grew some nice bulbs. And then last year again we had 2 lovely strong new growths, but they matured without forming sheaths. And now I've got another 2 new growths that are maturing. But at some point soon, if they're not going to show any sheaths, then they're not going to bloom. Because basically the bulbs form, the leaf comes out the top, it only has a single leaf, but then part way through that progress, what looks like a second leaf starts to show. That's the sheath. It's not a second leaf at all. And if that doesn't show, then it's not going to bloom, because it needs to grow that sheath out. They grow quite large and then have a bit of a rest for a while, and then the buds form a bit later. But we'll have a look. We'll have a look round and see if anything's changed on there. There was something else. No, it's gone. I'll leave it at that. As I said, I've got an awful lot of stuff in there to do. Believe it or not, I've got washing to do. You know, I might be a scruffy toad, but I do need clean clothes now and again. Can't wear the same ones for a 3rd week, can I? But there's some people believe that. And you'll never know whether it's true or not. This little bud on here is coming on. And I did check with Lynn, this is Dendrobium aberrans. So, nice little Latoria species, but tiny on the blooms, but nonetheless we're going to get one. So that's good. So, another gift. Yes, so we got things coming on, and I'm pleased with this Latoria because this is one of my favourites. This is, he says, forgetting, Rhodostictum. And this was nearly lost, but it managed to hold some of its leaves, even though some of them don't look so good. It held them, and as long as there's some green on leaves, they still perform a function. This was the latest growth that managed to keep all of its 3 leaves, and I do believe, because that spike has already bloomed, but if you look between that leaf and that leaf, right at the base, I think that's a spike starting. Plus, we've got 2 new growths. That's the important bit. I need growths on this. I need these to get going. So hopefully they will. So I've just seen a couple of mealybugs on that growth, which are now X. So they're still around, but not so bad. So yeah, so I'm pleased that that one's going to come back and not be lost. That are good. And yeah, I'll leave it at that, and I'll see you next time. I haven't got a clue what I'm going to be filming this week. That's not my Sunday thoughts. Those thoughts are for Monday when I get up. I do know I've got to go to the dentist sometime this week. I think that's Wednesday. But I always book those quite early in the day so that the rest of the day is free. But I'm going to have a little tete-a-tete with the dentist, because last time I went he replaced a filling that's a slither on the edge of one of my front teeth. So it's just the edge of it. And he replaced it because it had come out. And when I go back this time, he can replace it again because it's come out again. I must take part of the blame, because that was, you know, I said I got kidnapped and taken to my sister's place. I don't have things like crisps and stuff like that around the house, that sort of junky type food. But because we'd gone round there for lunch and it was that type of lunch, there was crisps. And I forgot, we're not supposed to eat crunchy things like that with our front teeth, are we? So I think it was partly me that pushed it out. They shouldn't keep coming out. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So something has just hit me, fragrance. Is it still you? Yep, still that one. This is the nice purple one that was allowed to arch over, which now means it's a bit in the way. But fragrance going, the Red Fantasy Twinkles down to about half its blooms now. The rest of them are all over the place, quite honestly. In the pots, on the floor, all over the place. But the Yellow Twinkle is opening up quite nice now. And I think there was somebody trying to sell one of these at the society yesterday. But that's looking quite nice. It's only a tiny little piece that broke off when I repotted it. But you know, these can bloom on really small plants. They look most spectacular on a large plant in full bloom. That's how they look their best, because the blooms are tiny. But nice little splash of delicate yellow with a touch of orange. Gorgeous little blooms, and not much fragrance on that at the moment. But the others are doing their best to fill the place at the moment. So quite a lot of twinkles on the go. And somebody specifically asked, what happened to your Dendrobium harveyanum? So I've just remembered that comment from a while back. Well, I nearly lost the plant, and it was mounted at the time. I took it off the mount and split it. One bit went in a pot, the other bit went back on the mount. That bit didn't make it, which on reflection might have been a bit silly, because it went downhill on a mount. It was a bit silly putting it back on there. But the piece in the pot has pushed up a new growth, so I've saved the plant. What I need it now to do is grow. This cane back here did actually try to bloom a while ago, and I stopped it. But we do have a new growth, and I believe, if it'll come out, we've now got some roots. Are you going to come out? That's the trouble with putting them in these pots. No, I can't. If I turn that upside down, half the media is going to come out, and it's. I could try lifting it out with the plant. Oh yeah, so I must have good enough roots to lift it by. Yeah, I have actually got some roots going now. So we've saved the plant, and that is, when that's in bloom, it seems to be a lot of people's favourite dendrobium. It's a good strong yellow covered in frilly bits, frilly petals and sepals, no petals I think, and lip. It's got little frills all over it. It's a beautiful little bloom. So we may see that again. And that new growth there, oh, I thought that was trying to bloom, but it's just the bract sheath. So we've saved the plant. That don't come up for sale very often. And when it does, you tend to get a tiny little piece and not a decent bit. So yes, so the purchasing of orchids from my point of view is still okay for the next year. Not that I have big plans on stocking up with loads of new orchids, but I do have a couple in mind that I may now have access to. I'm still not too keen on buying from nurseries in the EU, because I've got no guarantee what I'm going to get, because you will never get a picture of the plant they're going to send you. They don't do that. You'd have to go to an individual seller to get that, what I call a more personal touch. If somebody's prepared to take 4 or 5 pictures of the actual plant you're going to get, then you know what you're getting. You can see it. So providing it's not damaged in transit, you know what you're going to get. And I do have a couple of trusted sellers. It's just a matter of them coming up with what I want. So I may still get some, but we shall see. Anyway, my coffee's getting cold. I've got work to do on that laptop over there, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.